I suppose probably you don't need another reminder about what date this is. So far, everybody this morning has probably told you on the news. September the 11th, 16 years ago. And we wanted to remind you in a little different way with somebody who spent some time in the aftermath of September 11th. All of that destruction and all of that glory to Gordon James, founder of Gordon James Public Relations, a regular guest on this program. You and I were in Indonesia together after the tsunami. You are no stranger to disasters, but this being September the 11th, remind us about your association with New York and that period of time.
Well, I actually had two very close friends that were involved in it. One was the President of the United States, of course, who was there immediately thereafter.
George W.
Right. And I joined him there for United Nations General Assembly meetings about 2 weeks later. But the most important person, of course, was my son, Graham, who worked at the time for MTV, and on the morning of the attacks, he was about 2 or 3 blocks away from the towers. And of course, we couldn't find him all day long. And we're very concerned about his safety and what had happened. And it turned out he had walked all the way back to his apartment, and it took him most of the day. And he finally called us around 3:30 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon on his landline and let him know that he was okay. So
when a parent hears about that kind of a disaster and knows that a child could possibly be right in the middle of it, you and your wife must have been frantic.
Well, we were. And the worst part about that day for us and for everyone else is nobody was sure when it was going to be over. The Twin Towers were hit, the Pentagon was hit, the farmland and farm ground in Pennsylvania was hit, and we weren't sure it was over. And but fortunately it was, and that was the...
Fortunately for you, fortunately for Graham, for the whole family. Talk about, though, going back there with the President of the United States. You, a close personal friend of the Bush family for years.
Yes, and they called and said, would I please come in and take care of the United Nations General Assembly meetings, which are held every September in New York at the United Nations, obviously. And that's about 2 weeks later. And so I went into New York City, and we had several tours of Ground Zero. And of course, at that time, it was still a crime scene, so you couldn't take pictures or anything. The haunting thing was that every so often, every 30 minutes or 45 minutes, a bell would ring, would go off, and that meant everything stopped and they had found another victim, and we all stopped what we were doing and waited until they had taken that person out and gotten them secure.
And you look back, though, and I know you, Gordon, so well, you still must have a swell of pride in the first responders then, as you continue to see them respond in the wake of an ongoing disaster in Florida and Texas.
It's amazing how we can come together, how suddenly we can just forget about racial differences, economic differences, social differences, religious, political differences, everything, and come together and work together as a team. It's incredible, and I don't know why it takes something like this to get us to do it. We should just do it automatically.
So here you are in this town, Mr. Public Relations, and considering what that means, I wonder how it is that with this cloud of negativity over the country, not having anything to do specifically with the disasters itself, but just simply the cloud that exists in our moods toward one another, I have the feeling that you're still an optimist.
I am, and you know, sometimes this reminds me of your worst homeowners association meeting. So, you know, people that normally would just enjoy a cocktail on the patio or at each other's throats, and it doesn't seem to make much sense. But we live in, of course, a wonderful country, and the fact that we can coexist with each other under some trying circumstances is amazing to me. But I am the eternal optimist, that's for sure. I'm in the feel-good business.
That's one of the reasons why it is you're always welcome here on the Daily Mix. And one more favor. Tell Graham we spoke about him, okay?
I will. Thank you.
Pat McMahon with Gordon James on this September 11th.